Tonight we have developing news. Alaska has lost one of its political legends.
Around 6 p.m. this evening, Congressman Don Young's office confirmed he had passed away. Alaska's lost its longest-serving lawmaker. Young was 88 years old. His office says he passed away while traveling home to Alaska.
Don Young was currently serving his 25th term in the U.S. House of Representatives and was the dean of the House. He was first sworn in back in 1973 and most recently re-elected in 2020.
He was born in California in 1933, but Fort Yukon is home for him. He served in the state legislature from 1966 to 1973.
And reaction is pouring in tonight as the news spreads all around Alaska and the country.
Patrick Enslow spoke to Senators Lisa Murkowski and Dan Sullivan tonight and joins us now with their reactions to Young's passing.
Mike, Maria, they both described the news of Don Young's death as sudden and shocking as they mourn the loss of a man they say epitomized Alaska.
We were really blessed by Don.
Congressman Don Young's efforts on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. loomed large as he fought for Alaska, having been elected to 25 terms as a state's lone U.S. congressman.
He was 88 years old, but he was, by God, going strong. And Alaskans have seen the benefit of not only his political efforts, but his passion for Alaska.
A leader for Alaska and a leader for those who served alongside him, like Senator Murkowski and Senator Sullivan.
But to me, he was also a mentor. I learned so much from Don Young. You know, how to fight when he had to fight, how to work to get things done when you had to do that. And
he was not Washington, D.C. He was Alaska. And I think that's the legacy of a man. It's not legislation that is something that you say it was public law and number whatever it was.
Alaska's two U.S. senators called Young a friend, and both say his effect on the state he represented will be felt for years to come.
I think we're going to see all kinds of people from all walks of life coming out telling stories of how Don Young impacted them in such a positive way.
All things Alaska, but there was no phoniness to him, no pretensions. Everything that he did was to benefit his state and the people that he loved.
A presence they say will be missed in the nation's capital and back home here in Alaska.
And rest in peace, Don Young.
Senator Murkowski was in Arizona for meetings when she heard the news and says she will be headed home to Alaska soon. Senator Sullivan remains on the East Coast, where he has been isolating following a COVID-19 diagnosis earlier this morning.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi commented on Don Young's passing. She said in part that it was a privilege to be sworn in by him as dean when she became Speaker of the House. And he never failed to honor the special traditions of our treasured institution. She says his historic service brought luster to the Congress, and his many friends in the House will strive to live up to his towering legacy. And House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy also commented this evening via Twitter. He said in part, Don Young was a giant with a heart as big as the Capitol and a spirit as strong as the Alaskan wild. His absence will leave Congress less colorful and less punctual, but his decades of service filled every room and touched every member.
And Governor Mike Dunleavy has reacted to the news. He said in part in a statement late this afternoon, Congressman Don Young has been a great friend and colleague of mine for many years. I'm deeply saddened to hear of the passing of this amazing man who in many ways formed Alaska into the great state it is today. So what happens next? It is Governor Dunleavy who is tasked with calling a special election to fill Young's seat in the U.S. Congress. According to Alaska statutes, a special election must take place between 60 to 90 days after the vacancy occurs.
Don Young was well into his campaign to seek his 26th term in office.
Dave LaValle talked with the candidates who sought to replace him in the fall. Dave?
Mike, Maria, the candidates told me tonight this is not about their campaigns. Republican Nick Begich co-chaired Don Young's last campaign 2 years ago. Anchorage Assembly member Chris Constant is the Democratic candidate. Both said tonight and the next few days are about honoring the life of an Alaska legend.
Don Young, his love for Alaska, for this nation, never wavered. He was a tireless worker for our state, and he's going to be sorely missed.
Just a punch to the stomach. You know, just 2 days ago I was in D.C. and had missed an opportunity to see Congressman Young, which really hurts because now he's gone. And, you know, there's an old saying, there's a time for every purpose under heaven, and now is a day to grieve.
State Senator Josh Revak spent about 6 years as an aide to Congressman Young and spent all of that time in Alaska. The loss, he says, has hit him a bit harder than most people.
Today is a sad day for Alaska. We lost a hero and a champion for the state of Alaska and for the nation. And to me, Don Young was more than just a former boss. He was like family to me.
Don Young had served as Alaska's representative since 1973 when he won a special election held in the wake of the disappearance of incumbent Nick Begich. Maria, Mike?
The Alaska Federation of Natives also responded to the news today.
President Julie Kitka said in part, "We did not always agree. However, he was always willing to listen. And if he could help, he would."
The word spread quickly today, and throughout the state, Alaskans reacted to the news.
Their longest-serving lawmaker, the Dean of the Congress, had passed away.
I think it's going to be hard to find somebody to fill his shoes. It's going to be hard to find somebody who has his charisma, his abilities in Washington. It's going to take time to find someone who has the clout Don Young had.
Since he has been in office for many, many years, I'm pretty sure that many Alaskans will miss him. And yeah, he will be replaceable, but he'll be hard to replace.
Yeah, it's sad news. He was our guy.
Whether you agreed or disagreed with his politics and opinions, there's no disputing that Don Young left his mark on Alaska.
And his legacy is as big as the great land he loved. For the 25th time, Don Young campaigned for Congress, cast his ballot, then got ready to go back to work. In our last interview with him on election night, we asked why he had done it for so long.
I like what I do for Alaskan people. I've said I've been their spokesman in Washington, D.C., and it gives you a great feeling of confidence and when you can help people out. And that's what I've been doing for all these years. And I still enjoy the campaign. I enjoy working with Alaskans, and we get things done.
And for Don Young, getting things done started way back in 1964 when he was elected mayor of Fort Yukon. 2 years later, election to the state legislature, where he served until 1973. That same year, he won a special election to become Alaska's only member of the U.S. House of Representatives. And just hours after being sworn in, he led the battle for approval of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. He called it his single most important achievement. His colleagues honored him as Freshman Congressman of the Year. But Don Young's battles for Alaska were just beginning. More than a dozen times, Don Young led efforts in the House to open up ANWR to oil drilling, a fight he waged for decades.
I will get ANWR before I get out of this job. I've told some of those groups that don't like me, you want to get rid of me, pass ANWR.
Young was also one of the main sponsors of the 1976 Magnuson-Stevens Act, which extended U.S. fishing waters out to 200 miles and established 8 regional fishery management councils to prevent overfishing.
My MO is that you want something done, ask Don to do it.
In 2017, Young became the Dean of the House of Representatives, the longest-serving member, and he was also the oldest current-serving member of Congress.
When you think about the legislative accomplishments for Alaska, there's really nothing that Don didn't lead on in the House, whether it's ANWR, or King Cove, Trans-Alaska Pipeline. He's been involved with all of it.
But Don Young's legislative record wasn't the only mark he made on the nation's capital.
Springbuck, Puku.
His D.C. office was wall-to-wall hunting trophies.
PETA doesn't like me. I don't understand that.
Young said the unique decorations helped him keep a last frontier state of mind.
It's got a reputation on the Hill to be the most unique office, and I've always said if you don't like dead eyes, don't come to my office.
Sometimes the crosshairs were on his colleagues.
You know, I rarely do this, but I'm deeply disappointed in my good lady from Washington. Doesn't know damn thing what she's talking about.
But his gruffness often led to a quick apology.
Withdraw my offending words, And to the lady, I do apologize. I get very defensive about my state.
Don Young saw a lot of changes in D.C. In the last few years, he lamented the harsh and often bitter political divide.
I've learned how to work across the aisle, and one of the frustrating things I see that break down now. And I try to keep it together as much as possible. I'm being accused of not voting for the Patriot Act.
Go ahead and clear that up.
I did vote for the Patriot Act. I have documentation of that. In fact, I
Don,
have it
you
right
are
here.
lying. HR 3162, roll call vote 398 on October 24th, 2001. You weren't.
HR 2975.
Challengers who tried and failed to defeat him came to learn why he had such political staying power with the voters.
I think part of it is because he is very spirited, and unlike a lot of politicians, what you see is what you get. And he's a fighter.
Despite all of his victories, Don Young told us he never took re-election bids for granted.
The decision will be about, do they think I can still do the job as I've done in the past? Will I continue to do it for the future, for the good of the state?
He was running again for re-election to serve the state he loved, but fate had different plans.
You have your bright spots and you have some of your duller spots. And overall, I think I've had a lot more sunshine than I have clouds.
Don Young sponsored more than 1,100 pieces of legislation during his time on Capitol Hill. 648 became law.
That's amazing. Well, next, we'll hear from an Alaska historian about Don Young's impact on building Alaska. Don Young fought for Alaska in the halls of Congress for decades.
And he touched several issues that shaped Alaska's past and future. Joining us live tonight is UAA Emeritus Professor of History, Stephen Haycock. Stephen, thanks for joining us. And if you would, put Don Young's place in Alaska history into perspective for us. How big was his impact through the years?
His impact was huge, probably equal to Senator Stevens. It's coincidental that he should have served for 49 years, the 49th state. He was extraordinarily effective. He'll always be known, of course, as the accidental congressman, but in the same breath, people will remember that he was the longest serving Republican member of the U.S. House ever. He was, of course, rough, irascible, but he was extraordinarily effective. He knew how Congress worked, and he paid great attention to his constituents. So I think he'll be remembered as that funny old guy who got things done.
Few members of Congress, as you said, have served anywhere near the length of time Don Young was in Congress. How did his longevity help our state?
Oh, I think that the longer somebody serves there, the better they understand what it takes in order to get legislation passed. They make many, many friends, many contacts, and he was extremely good at that. He was for all of his irascibility, he was an approachable guy, and worked very effectively with people. He was personable in his gruff kind of way.
Stephen, Don Young had his share of victories. He certainly had his share of controversies. How do you think history is going to remember Congressman Don Young?
I think the controversies will probably be forgotten historically, except by those people who do a lot of digging. There was controversy with the oil industry. There was controversy over real estate in Florida. He was investigated by the FBI. No charges were ever brought. So he managed to avoid that. And I think he probably was somewhat chagrined by all of that. One of the wonderful things about Don Young was that he could learn. He changed his mind on the Affordable Care Act. He changed his mind on COVID, probably because he got it, but nonetheless, he changed his mind. Changed his mind on a number of things. He was, on the surface, he was this right-wing guy, little right of center, maybe far right of center. But in point of fact, he had a reputation in the Congress of being very bipartisan and focusing on the issue and not on the personalities that sometimes divided people on issues.
UAA Emeritus Professor of History, Stephen Haycock, thank you so much for joining us tonight to share your perspective on Don Young.
Well, and thank you, and I want to offer my condolences to his wife, Ann, and to the family.
We all do. Thank you, Stephen.